Hi, I'm Marie Gale. I'm from Southwestern Oregon, and I'm the author of Soap and Cosmetic Labeling, How to Follow the Rules and Regs Explained in Plain English, and Good Manufacturing Practices for Soap and Cosmetic Handcrafters. And today we're going to be talking about math and measuring, some basic tools and concepts that you'll need when you make handcrafted soap and cosmetics. The first thing we're going to cover is how and why to tare a scale. You may have heard the term tare when it comes to measuring out ingredients or using a scale. The term tare means the weight of a container when it's empty, as in the tare of the bottle was 1 ounce, or the jar's tare was 1 ounce. You can't measure, say, olive oil without putting it in something. So when you're putting it on your scale, you have to make sure that you take into account the tare or weight of the container that you're using. The action word to tare, or as in to tare a scale, means to set the scale so it takes into account the weight of the container. The first thing to do is to turn your scale on and make sure that it measures 0. Then place your container on it. You can see that this measuring cup weighs 23 ounces. Most scales have a button that says tare, or it might say 0. When you push that button, it sets the measurement back to 0. So when you weigh something, in this case we're weighing water, you can see that we're weighing just the weight of the water. And now we have 4 ounces of water. To double check, take your material off of the scale, set it back to 0. Now this measuring cup weighed 23 ounces, the water weighed 4 ounces, so the total weight should be 27 ounces. Now you know your measurement was correct. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the difference between volume and weight. Measuring by volume measures how much space something takes up. For example, 1 measuring cup holds 8 ounces by volume. You can see on here, these are measurements by volume. If we tare the scale for this container, and we put in 1 cup of rose petals by volume, you can see that the actual weight is less than 1 ounce. Generally, volume measurements are used for liquid materials or for things that are light and fluffy, like rose petals or lavender buds or flowers, things of that nature. Measuring by weight measures how much something weighs regardless of how much space it takes up. As we saw from the rose petals, 1 cup of rose petals actually weighs less than 1 ounce. Potato chips, for example, can fill a big bag, but if you crunch them all down, they'll fill up just a tiny space, but the weight is the same. Gram, pound, kilo, and avoirdupois ounce are weight measurements. Tablespoon, teaspoon, cup, fluid ounce, quart, gallon, liter, milliliter are all volume measurements. The only place where the measurements are the same is with water. 1 ounce of water by weight fills up 1 fluid ounce of space. When something floats, it generally weighs less than water. Oil, for example, floats in water and it weighs less. This is sweet almond oil, and you can see that 8 ounces by volume weighs only 7.5 ounces by weight. When you're labeling products that are liquid, you should put the fluid ounces on the label along with the milliliters. If you're labeling products that are solid or semi-solid, you put the weight in both ounces and grams. Because volume measurements are much less reliable, especially for things like rose petals or other solid materials, most cosmetic recipes are done in terms of weight, even for the liquid items. So if you see a recipe for a lotion that calls for 8 ounces of almond oil, generally that means 8 ounces by weight, not 8 ounces by volume. When all the items are done by weight, that also makes it possible to calculate accurate percentages of each ingredient in the final product. One interesting problem that we run into is that the label requirements for liquid products require that the labels say the amount in fluid ounces. So if you buy 32 ounces, that's fluid ounces of olive oil, when you actually go to weigh it for your product, you're going to end up with actually about 30 to 31 ounces by weight of olive oil. That's something you need to take into account when you're calculating your product costs or when you're figuring out how much of a product you need to purchase. The next thing we're going to take a look at is converting a recipe that's in amounts into percentages. The first thing to do is make sure that your recipe is written with all the same units. This recipe here has everything listed in ounces. What we want to do is calculate the total number of ounces in the recipe. This would be how much the recipe makes. In this case, it's 50 ounces. What we have to do now is calculate the percentage of each ingredient. To calculate the percentage, take the amount, in this case it would be 15 ounces, and divide it by 50 ounces. In this case, it's 0.3 or 30%. Shea butter is also 15 ounces, so it's 30%. Avocado is 10 ounces. 10 ounces divided by 50 ounces is 0.2 or 20%. Almond oil is 9 ounces or 18%. And the fragrance is 1 ounce or 2%. If you add up all the percentages, we end up with 100%. So we had a recipe that was for 50 ounces. What happens if we want to make, say, 80 ounces? If we're going to make 80 ounces, then we just have to figure out what 30% of 80 ounces is. In order to do that, you take 80 ounces and times it by 0.30, which is your decimal form of the percentage, and you end up with 24 ounces. Shea butter also is 24 ounces. Avocado oil is 20% of 80 ounces. So we have 80 ounces times 20% is 16 ounces. 18% of 80 ounces is 14.4 ounces. 2% of 80 ounces is 1.6 ounces. If you add all this together, as a double check, it turns out to 80 ounces. Now if you want to make your lotion bar recipe, instead of making 50 ounces, you can make 80 ounces by using the percentages to calculate your new amounts. Converting to a different unit. Sometimes your recipe will be in ounces and you need grams. Sometimes you'll have one item that's listed in grams and you need ounces, or you have cups and need ounces, or teaspoons and need cups. So you need to be able to convert from one unit to another. In order to convert, the first thing you need is the conversion rate. You can find the conversion rate between one unit to another in various different books. Often a cookbook will have those, or you can just go to Google. The most common place you're going to need a conversion from ounces to grams or ounces to milliliters is on your label, where you're required to have both the inch-pound unit and the metric unit. Let's say your product is 4 ounces and you need to convert it to grams to put on the label. Your product is 4 ounces. The conversion rate to grams is 1 ounce equals 28.34952. 28.34952 grams. So all you have to do is multiply the number of ounces times the conversion rate. And you end up with 113.39808 grams. In this case, you can probably round it down, so your label will say 4 ounces, 113 grams. The same process gets done if you're converting from fluid ounces to milliliters. Whenever possible, you should plan on doing your math calculations before you start making your product. You don't want the added stress of being in the middle of mixing your oils when it comes to trying to do your calculations. The biggest and most common mistakes you're going to make when doing your math calculations are transposing numbers, that is, writing 3-1 when you mean to be writing 1-3, doing silly math addition and subtraction errors, as in adding 2 + 2 = 5, or moving your decimal point, so like in this example, instead of having 113 grams, your decimal point gets accidentally moved and you have 11.3 grams. Look at your answers when you do your math and make sure that you do a common sense check. Does it make sense? Is 4 ounces actually the same as 11.3 grams? No. You should go back and take another look. Also, double check or triple check your work if you have any uncertainty. Math and measuring are fundamental skills that you need in making handcrafted soap and cosmetic products. Take your time, double check your work. The more care you take in doing your math and measuring, the better results you're going to see in your final product.